All right, I'll let Mark in and we'll get started. Sound good? Cool. Okay, so welcome. Sorry to keep you waiting, Mark. Welcome
Hello.
today. Hey. So I'll give a little bit of an introduction here for anybody watching on Facebook, YouTube, and then we'll dive into it. I'll let you know about our guest today as well. So welcome everyone. It's the Business Podcast Mastermind that started with a few talented friends in the business and podcasting space who expanded it to create a weekly event where a wider audience can join. You have a few hosts here. First, I'll call out Rob Greenlee. He is the VP of Content and Partnerships at Libsyn, former chair of the Podcast Academy and co-host of the New Media Show and longtime evangelist of the podcasting industry. Also have Henry Lopez, a serial entrepreneur, small business coach, host of the top-rated How of Business podcast, dedicated to helping others start, run, and grow their small business. We have Vinay Koshi here as well. Oh, wait, did our guest get kicked off?
Kind of looks like
You're
it.
muted, Henry. Can't hear you.
It kind of looks like
Sorry,
it.
yeah, it looks like you might have dropped off.
Okay, let me see if I can get behind that.
I don't see him in the waiting room or anything.
Yeah, I don't see him at all either. Yeah.
Internet cut out. Give me 1 second. Talk to Fred.
Vinay's here though. That's a big deal.
Yeah, that's a big deal. It's good to see you, Vinay.
Vinay, we're going to start sending out search parties.
Yeah, you might have needed to do that.
We could have easily found you.
I'm going to give him a quick call and see before we continue, just to see if there's an issue with his internet or something. Sure. I'll let you guys can chat amongst yourself.
What have you been up to, Vinay?
So I was away for 2 weeks, and then
away on vacation or?
Yeah, just a bit of a road trip up north within the state, visiting friends, but came back to some really muggy weather, which kicked off hay fever.
Oh gosh, okay.
He's back. Did you change locations as well?
I did. I had to go downstairs to get the proper power source for my computer. So,
okay.
That's how that went. You get the rapid power so not have to take too much time.
Okay, cool. I'm getting a little glitching on your audio for some reason.
Okay. Let me see if I
think he's got you on a speaker, which is creating feedback.
Yeah, maybe you should put on headphones if you have them.
I can.
Okay, in the meantime, I'll mute him and I'll continue with the intro here. Let's see here. So we got.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Better?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Sorry. Okay, good.
I think it's better. Are you hearing us through the headphones or through your computer speakers right now?
Through the headphones.
It's really interesting. The signal is it's pretty weird. It's pretty weak. It's like kind of, I don't know what's going on with it.
But it's horrible. It sounds like a poor connection is what it
sounds. Yeah, poor connection. Yeah, or like a poor bandwidth or something like that.
Are you on Wi-Fi?
I am. Let me try one more time. I usually have this issue.
Yeah, maybe on the wrong network or something.
Okay. Let me see what I can do. I'll come back one time.
Okay, cool. No problem at all. All right, well, I'll continue with the introductions. It looks like he's just getting his setup figured out. So let's see here. So I was in the middle of introducing Henry, I believe, serial entrepreneur, small business coach, host of the top-rated How of Business podcast, dedicated to helping others start, run, and grow their small businesses. We have Vinay Koshi, host of the Predictable B2B podcast, founder of Sproutworth. He helps others achieve predictable business growth and influence through content marketing. And I'm Ethan Janney, business and executive coach and co-host of the Run With It podcast, which invites 7+ figure entrepreneurs to share business ideas and the action steps to launch them. And I'll give an intro of Fred once he gets back here. So, but yeah, we can continue. We can just continue a little bit of a pre-session chat here. How are, what were you were chatting with Vinay? Or did I cut you off?
Vinay said he got lost in Safari and then made his way back to civilization. Then he had hay fever. That's what I caught.
Okay. Are you making that up, or did he actually say that?
I think the only part that's real is the hay fever part.
Okay. I wasn't paying attention. So.
He
Lost
was
in
gone
the
on some kind of a
tubes.
trip, right, Vinay? Tell us.
I did have, we did go on a bit of a holiday road trip, but yeah.
Lost in the tubes of the internet. Yes.
Cool. Well, hope you had fun. Probably everybody's got a huge craving for travel lately, so I'm sure you're fulfilling that. Are you traveling, Mark? You look like you have a different background than typical.
Yeah, I've added a different screen behind me.
Okay, nice.
The bookshelf is behind there, right?
Yeah, it is. I got fed up with it, so I decided I'd invest in a screen. And then if I do events and things, which I have been invited to a few, I've declined a couple, but I can take it with me as well. So that was the plan.
So then, do you move it fully behind you when you're doing?
Yeah, it shuts down. It's like a promotion banner. So at the top, you just pull down, and then you take down, and then it's sort of that big, and you can stick it in a bag and take it with you.
Yeah, you're free to open it up, give us the full effect if you want. I'm curious to see what it looks like.
Well, it's narrow, right? So you just you leave you position it where it is typically.
Well,
you leave it where it is?
I'm trying it at the moment.
Just
this is the first couple of times I've used it, so I'm going to see, because I'll have to change maybe where that is, and then maybe bring it a little bit more central. I'm just sort of playing around with it at the moment.
All right,
Yeah,
I'll cut in here.
There's the bookshop.
I'll cut in here because Fred seems to be back. How's it going, Fred?
I think this is better. Yes, this should be better.
Definitely seems at least a little bit better.
Oh God, I am so sorry. I'm on a podcast mastermind and I can't pull together my tech.
I think you're a lot better than you were. So we'll give it a shot for a little bit. If not, you'll have to do like sign language or something, or like type something in the chat. I don't know.
Yeah, it happens to the best of us.
Yeah, totally.
You know what? Let me try this. This might work.
Are you talking? Now we can't even hear you. Sorry, that didn't help. But I think your audio is better.
Okay, is this better?
Yeah, that sounds pretty normal. Before you sounded like you're stuck in some sort of wormhole, Max Hadron kind of, if anybody remembers that.
Wow, that's a reference there.
Right.
We need to bring that back. Okay, anyways.
I thought it was it was ahead of its time.
Yeah, it was actually. Okay, we just gave introductions to kind of all the sort of co-hosts here. So I'll skip into introducing you, and then we'll get started chatting. I'll give the context. So our guest today, a wonderful fellow. His name is Dr. Fred Moss. He is a graduate of Northwestern University Medical School, licensed psychiatrist who has served the mental health industry for nearly 4 decades. During that time, he's consulted patients, practitioners, medical facilities, nonprofit organizations, and community groups. Dr. Fred is the host of the inspiring Welcome to Humanity podcast, a show that explores what it means to be human and how to live an extraordinary life. And I thought I'd bring Fred on as mix it up a little bit. Usually we bring in people who might have some very specific expertise in the podcasting industry or something like that. But I thought it'd be interesting. Fred's been doing his podcast for about a year. He has a podcast producer, Ryan Levesque, who's I don't know if you're still working with him, but I found that out, and that sounds pretty exciting. And he's a really powerful guy. So he has a lot of potential with his podcast. And I thought it might be interesting to just kind of deep dive into what he's doing, see if he needs any help, find out what kind of, if he wants to share, what kind of stuff has led to where he is so far with this podcast. He's had some pretty cool guests and had some interesting conversations. And also he's just great at talking. I love listening to Dr. Fred talk. So maybe he can spread some of that magic to us. So Dr. Fred, welcome to our mastermind.
It is a deep and honest pleasure to be here. The privilege is mine. It's I was just invited here less than a couple of days ago, so I don't know what to expect, but I look like I'm with some powerful, interesting, curious people. So it's the pleasure is mine to be here with you this morning. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So I'm curious, if anything comes to mind when you think of like what you're looking for like help for your podcast, or like how to grow it, or obstacles or ambitions, or what's on top of mind for you with your podcast.
That's great. So the name of the podcast is Welcome to Humanity, and that's actually the name of the brand that preceded the podcast that I have now become. So the Dr. Fred brand is the overarching brand, and the Welcome to Humanity is sort of the ethos of what we're talking about here as I carry on my transformational coaching or my restorative coaching, or what we're really doing is we're reconfiguring and transforming, recontextualizing everything that it means to be mentally healthy and mentally ill. And by doing that, and by really focusing on, people being great and being whole and complete just as they are, and having every experience just be incorporated as a fundamental nature, a fundamental component of being human, we get to start from an empowered context when we deal with each other. And when I do that, what I have found is that, through connection, creativity, and communication, the possibility of healing instantaneously, things that have been disempowering for people for years or decades, becomes very real. And for the first time in my life, 40 years into mental health and, 30 plus years as a psychiatrist, I'm actually, people are actually healing in my midst. I'm sourcing healing in the mental health realm. So the natural course of events had me create a podcast last year. And this was, I was introduced to podcasts 12 or 14 years ago before I had any clue what it even meant. And the idea is someday that I could host a podcast or become someone who could interview folks for their, to showcase, to spotlight their natural, extraordinary lives. And that could be each and any person, actually. So my demographics goes about 7.8 billion deep, because what really is here is that each and every one of us is living an extraordinary creative life just to get through the next moment. So having been trained in interviewing, as a natural course of events, as a natural subset of being a psychiatrist for so long, what I have now found is that I have a superpower in some ways of chasing people down the rabbit holes or up the ladders that they provide for us in order to spotlight their greatness, in order to really explore what's important to them, in order to create provocative and compelling conversations that apparently people are really enjoying by listening to. Real people are finding things for themselves that I didn't know that I was creating. And all I really have to do is listen closely to what my guest has to say, and then really explore with them the front edge of whatever the issues are that are coming up about their personal life or their business life or relationship life, and whatever aspect of life or philosophies or trials and tribulations they might be experiencing, refocusing and recreating them, and then creating an episode from that. And it seems like, it's been fun and easy for me. And now it's an opportunity to, how do I create sustainability? How do I create scalability? How do I create something here in the Dr. Fred brand that is not only fun and easy, because I could do several of these per day, but is something that, could sustain itself and be something that gets a wide audience, or at the very least, be something that costs less than it brings in.
Right.
So
do you even know, like, if you're looking for an advertising model, if you're looking for kind of just getting revenue through, because you're currently mostly just advertising yourself, your services, things like that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm just scratching the surface of what does it take to get endorsements, or what does it take to get advertising, or what does it take to get collaboratives or affiliates, or, how to couple it with a radio show, or how to couple it with other aspects of of media broadcasting, and including going on video, or like it's almost like I'm tripping into it at some level. And I am open, very open to look at, there are some people who are assisting me who have expressed some deep interest in, sort of swooping it up and in creating the next podcast, which is likely to be focused on something like you are not mentally ill, you are just human. Something like that might be the next iteration. And now it's a matter of carefully positioning this so that it has a strong foundation, moves forward, and maybe it is actually a profit-making opportunity, but more than anything else, that it at least be that it's sustainable and scalable at the very least.
Right.
And
yeah.
It might grow massively. I don't have a real idea of which model could fit.
Right. Well, Henry's got that kind of, sustainable thing with an audience, so he might have some insights or thoughts on
an initial question, if I might. So how would you summarize what you want the show to do for you, Dr. Fred?
Yeah.
What is it that you want it to do? Like Ethan alluded to, is it a platform to position you and to share, but also to then drive people to do what? What do you want them to do?
So the other things that I'm up to is I have, access to fairly high ticket coaching, and where we really just are reconfiguring the way people are looking at the world. So to give them back their power, to give them back their freedom via the recontextualization of how the world is appearing to them. And by really, so there's something like funneling people into my coaching program is at least one piece. But the real opportunity here is to broaden my reach, because what we have here is a real challenge to take on what is a very sick system that's called the mental health system in the United States. And not only in the United States, it's worldwide. So opening up provocative conversations that really upend the present prevailing narrative that dominates the mental health, mental illness world is really what I'm up to, and I only have access to do that through conversation. I can write all day, or I can even post content all day, but my real magic happens in interactivity like this, where we really challenge the roots of what mental illness is.
Right. And so what's your current cadence? How often are you releasing an episode?
I'm releasing an episode once a week right now. And that's been pretty steady for 54 weeks, I think. And I think we released 12 when we started, and then it's been one a week since then.
Yeah, that's great. Can you share any of the numbers, listeners, download stats? Can you share any of that, or just?
I can't do it reliably. We don't have enough, that's for sure. It's only a small crowd that's watching us, and I honestly haven't looked at those numbers enough to give you the truth on them. But they're pretty low, and I think that the promotion or the marketing or the exposure is really what's next here. So I've had a conversation with a pretty cool potential, investor or venture capitalist who's interested in this and is talking about he just sold a big product to Amazon last week. And he's talking about the possibility of linking this to Amazon and Whole Foods and really making a big deal out of it that way. So I feel like I'm at the hatching point of something that could just explode, that apparently this was maybe even linking it to a radio station or a radio broadcast. But there's a paucity just in the present state of affairs with online therapists and online psychiatrists who are interesting. Like the ones who are here aren't here anymore, and the ones who are coming aren't here yet. And it's like there's a little space to drop in Dr. Fred and have Dr. Fred actually indeed spread my wings a little bit into the community.
And then I think you touched on it when we first started the conversation, but what a feel do you have for who's listening and how engaged are they?
Well, I only get, it's certainly not at a level of hundreds of thousands or even tens of thousands, but the people who listen are saying stuff like, that's the best podcast I've ever heard, or I can't wait to your next one, or how can I get my friend to be a guest, or this icon over here, you and he would get along, or you and she would get along great. So there's what starts off really, Henry, what starts off as almost a hobby, like something to do because I love to talk, I love to listen, I love to explore, has now become something that, wow, I can maybe make a lifestyle, like actually have a job doing this. I could actually be me and be paid to be me and explore these extraordinary people and their lives in front of others, altering their lives, altering my life, and actually making a difference in the world of mental health on a global scale.
Yeah. Now it does sound though, Dr. Fred, like, I mean, there's the way I see it, there's two approaches. You either are fine with having a small niche, but very highly engaged audience, or your goal is to build a bigger, broader audience. It sounds like you're leaning towards and there's no right answer, right? It just depends on your content and what you're trying to do with the show. In my opinion, it seems to me like you're leaning towards the latter so that you have a broader reach and impact. Is that fair?
That is fair. I think initially, I think it's actually A and B, if I had to say that. I am okay with staying small, and to have power is, turning over one life is an extraordinary experience. It's not like it just is. Having a transformative sourcing effect on people and bringing back power where, disempowerment had been residing for years or decades is a very rewarding human experience. And if that's all I'm doing at a high concentration, that's fine. But I think at this point, now that I'm at least a little bit comfortable with the technology and a little bit comfortable with the vocabulary, a little bit comfortable with the community, it seems that I may have the capacity to launch into a much broader reach and to really make a difference at the thousands, tens of thousands, or even greater level.
Yeah. I was just listening to one of your episodes before we got started, but haven't had much time to listen to a lot of them. What's typically the call to action? What do you ask of the audience to do?
That Creative 8 thing, right? Is that
right?
Yeah.
Right. The Creative 8 is what has dominated most of the year, rather than what is now available, or what I call them my handlers. My coaches and friends have to say, which is moving people towards the coaching, or moving people towards I think the personal coaching or restorative coaching is really where the action would come from. So, I have some access to the creative, to the visual and performing artists in the world. And many of them have been devastated in the last year, at least by circumstances, see themselves as having been devastated. So rekindling creativity, rekindling communication, rekindling connection, and sourcing these people to bring their creativity back is another form of coaching that I provide.
So what is the Creative 8? I don't know what that means.
The Creative 8 is a book that I wrote, and it's really a process that I designed that has art, music, dancing, singing, drama, cooking, writing, and gardening as the top 8 things to do as creative human beings. So not just listening to music, but actually playing music, and not just listening to songs, but singing and actually doing art and those kinds of things. And so the process is, in this rather rudimentary, and it's only a snippet of what Dr. Fred and Welcome to Humanity really does, but the process is, a couple, 3 minutes a day, taking one of those, or each day I might cook for a minute, sing for a minute, and play music for a minute. And it just, constantly reminding myself and activating my creativity enough so that I don't fall back on, I'm so depressed I can't create. I fall back on, if I create, I no longer will need to stay depressed. And so really bringing creativity there is the process that Creative 8 brings forth.
I'll add a couple of thoughts. Couple of things that I'm thinking of is in terms of the coaching, the high ticket coaching, I think it sounds interesting for you to build a community of some sort along the way, where you maybe have a lower ticket group coaching or something like that. I don't know if you have done that, but that might be it. Because I know when some people do a higher ticket coaching, oftentimes it's sort of an upgrade from the sort of group coaching, and you have a certain portion of the people who did the group coaching who are interested in the higher tier. There's actually I just heard a friend describing this Lifebook. Have you heard of Lifebook?
I've heard of it, but I don't know the details.
It's a product that's been around for a while, put together by this couple. I can't think of their names, like John and Misty something or other. And then it was acquired by a larger brand. I'll come up with it in a minute. Vishen Lakhiani's brand, but I know that somebody said they went through like a couples program, and I think they said they said you get a full refund if you complete the program, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then at the end of the program, they say you either get the full refund at this point, or if you want, apply it. And actually, we have the next level is what we really want to get. You've basically done the introduction to like what we want to give to you. And it was kind of an interesting way to frame that, where it's like, yeah, you can go, you can be on your way, and you completed, congratulations, or like, here's some next level thing that's going on. I think those points of transition are interesting in those group coaching moments, right? So there's probably a portion of people who said, thanks, we're finished, and you can keep my money for that much, or that they maybe went on to the next segment. But I've seen that in multiple domains working. The other thing that I think that we've said a lot in this group, at least, is that niching down is powerful sort of as a fulcrum for reaching the wider audience. So like, if you niche down at first, and we've talked about the listener avatar quite a bit, like, who is that? Like, you can actually have an image of that person that's listening, that ideal person. And that way, when you're talking, you're not even saying, hey, you guys out there, you're saying, hey, to you, they're listening, and you almost can envision a person that you're talking to. And that can help with all sorts of aspects of growing, from, your persona in the podcast, to marketing it, to building it and creating the structure of it and all those things. So I think that might be an interesting thing to consider, even though there might be a broader audience that, who would be that person who was the most passionate about it. For me, I'm thinking, and also knowing you, it's maybe some of these mental health professionals who think there's a different way, right, than the primary, narrative, but they might feel a little bit alone in that process, and they feel comfortable in your confidence around it, and bringing these examples and sharing with them your experience and feeling like they're part of a community of mental health professionals. And of course, there's going to be other people that don't want to listen to it, but a community of those people who see a different future. And, I don't know, that could be an interesting focus for you.
Right. I think I appreciate what you're saying there. I think there's like a bifurcation of who to aim this at. There is the mental health professionals, but to be honest with you, some of them are so embedded in the way that they do their work, and their whole life, their whole life's work is built around how they do whatever it is they've learned to do. And in fact, they might be the most stubborn to consider any other way to proceed.
Might be. Maybe it's that person that has been diagnosed with something, and they've decided it's their superpower, or they've decided that they have a different idea about it and they need that kind of support. Yeah.
So let me comment to that too. I think that person is really interesting, but we've gone to the third iteration. So that person is really interesting, but let's say something about them, which is, if in fact you have submitted to having a diagnosis, if in fact you agree that you've had a diagnosis, there's an embeddedness that is naturally created in your psyche as well. So I'm sick and I'm going to be sick. I'm defective and I'm only going to get slowly more defective becomes a way of living, so that if I offer you something that has an escape from that, it still is ego dystonic from what it is you think about yourself. So the next group to aim at is actually the people who love those people. It's the caregivers, it's the family. It is, in fact, clinicians at times, or the neighbors. It's the people who know people who are suffering with this condition, rather than either the people who are naturally treating those people or the people themselves. It's the people who know and care about the welfare of their family member or their best friend or their, sister-in-law, who is struggling along with depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress, ADHD, whatever, drug addiction, even sleeplessness or confusion, or poor relationship status or loss of income or whatever else is going on.
So are you saying that's ideally who you want to reach with the show?
Well, it's who I think I'm going to reach. And let me point to it this way. Let's say I have depression. Let's say I think I have depression. When I'm hearing me on the radio as that person, I'm not likely to focus on how I have. I'm more interested in how this could affect my friend who also has depression. So in some ways, it's like, oh, that doesn't help me, but it would help my sister. That doesn't help me.
We're naturally better at helping others than helping ourselves. Is that?
Yes, or of throwing our hat in the ring and thinking that we could be helped with a highfalutin, whippersnapper Dr. Fred, who's got something new to say about this that isn't in line with what I've learned when I learned I was sick, but it could help my friend there. It could help my sister or my mom.
Well, to this end, as Ethan was talking about, what we've seen work, and obviously Rob will chime in as well, is, one of the challenges with podcasting is getting discovered, somebody finding you. And that's part of, if not the biggest challenge with growing our audiences. And so the harder, and like with any marketing, the harder we make it for somebody to say, oh, this show might be for me, then the harder it is going to be to grow that audience. So I would just challenge you to continue to think about, am I making it obvious who this show is ideally for? Even though anybody could be a listener and learn and get something of value from it, who am I targeting specifically? And so the more that you do that in all of your marketing, even if it's in potentially changing the name of the show, I'm not saying that's what I would do, but it's all about, how do I make it easy for that person to say, oh yeah, that sounds interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. I got that.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw in some thoughts here too. I think it's really important to map who you are, what your mission is with the content that you create. And I guess you started out saying at the beginning of this conversation that there was, you were concerned about how people weren't being able to get the help that they needed. At least that was the perception that I had from the mental health industry. So you have this vision of what your mission is, what you're trying to accomplish, right? What I would think about is how you can take that mission and summarize it down to like maybe 2 or 3 really high level, top, most important things that you think that other people will recognize and think that, yeah, I want to learn about that. And this maps to, what was just mentioned is around getting a topic focus and also getting a name of your show. Because I'm on your website right now, and the Welcome to Humanity doesn't necessarily help the audience figure out what you're there to provide them. So it's a bucket term that isn't specific enough for someone to say, I want to learn about that, right? So that's what you want to do. And especially when you're trying to be discovered, like in Google or in these platforms that people are trying to solve specific issues in their lives, right? So trying to map your content and the title of your show to that, I think would be helpful to you as far as getting more niche and more targeted to reaching a specific or a range of specific type of potential audience members.
One thing
Go ahead, please.
I was just going to say, one thing I kind of got from listening to a bit of your show, this kind of idea of Welcome to Humanity. I don't even know if it has come up in here, but the sort of idea is like, oh, you've got problems, you're depressed or, whatever it is. Welcome to humanity, right? Like you're not an aberration of somebody that has horrible things going on. Everybody's got their own horrible things going on. You're a human, and so like, let's deal with it from that aspect. And so I love that framing of it. It's just that maybe the title could be more obvious about it. I don't know. It could be like mentally ill. Welcome to humanity. I don't know.
One of the things, one of those things we've been, that's really funny actually. And I think that one of the things, I don't know if you guys like the title, but you are not mentally ill was the next title, for the next podcast. You are not medically ill. And then it's you're human, as this underneath tagline. You like that, Rob?
Yeah. I mean, I like the concept of, because most people don't like to think of themselves as being mentally ill. I think what people want to do is say that I'm here where I'm at right now. I want to get better. Right. So realizing that we're all flawed and that we can take proactive step through maybe mental health coaching to get better in some way. But yeah, I think most people don't want to admit that they're mentally ill or even think about that.
It's a conversation that people have. So they say, for the most part, and some of you can relate, it's like, I have depression, but I don't consider it a mental illness, or I have anxiety and it's not mentally ill. It's just me, so they wash away the mentally ill part, but in fact, they're endorsing their mental illness anyways, as a inherent defect in their character. Right. And so in some ways they straddle, like I'm doing, they sort of straddle that I'm not mentally, I have ADHD, but I don't consider it an illness. I have, and that's a really funny thing to have, like ADHD is a deficit and a disorder, but apparently people who have it don't think they have either a deficit or a disorder, and they are willing to say they have it nevertheless. So, that's exactly. It's like, I don't have any problems. I just have ADHD. It's like, well, that's
exactly.
Hey, so a further thought, and then I've got a couple of questions if I could, Ethan. So, one thing I will say, and of course, I know this is early days, so take this for what it's worth. We're all hypercritical of ourselves as well. I would say, based on what I've heard so far, Dr. Fred, that what you're trying to achieve doesn't yet match the funnel that you have on your website. I mean, for example, your book is buried. I couldn't find it until I really looked, which should be something that's very obvious. But I want you and the people you're working with is to think about, if the funnel is, I listened to your episode, it's interesting, I want to learn more about him, and maybe I'll do coaching. What I've found is that there's a big leap from I hear you and I'm starting to develop trust, to even get people to schedule a free consultation is a big leap. So what they want is something in between, what we call lead magnets. And you've got one of the best lead magnets, which is a book, right? So think of thinking of through that funnel that then leads to scheduling a consultation, and the website needs to be around that. That's just my thought there from a marketing perspective. Question I have for you, since obviously you are a trained expert in interviewing, as you shared, that I'd love to learn from you some thoughts on when you go about preparing to interview someone, in this case, the context of a show. How do you go about formulating those good questions that get people, as you said, up and down that ladder? Are there some tips that we can learn from you on how to formulate those questions, how to ask those questions? So I take a little risk on this answer. And there's an opportunity to get enough of a bio so that you have a general infrastructure framework of who it is that they think you're speaking to. So, when you talk to Dr. Fred, one of the things you're going to hear about me is that I'm a psychiatrist. I should let you know that early, that I'm a conventionally trained psychiatrist, so that you're like, oh, he's a psychiatrist. So there's something about like getting a framework of what it is that I want to hold out for you to, like, who are you talking to? But I think once the conversation started, each of us are in a different space second by second than where we were moments ago. And really getting where the person is right this very minute in what are they really walking in? What is Henry Lopez really walking in with today? Like, what is really on your mind right now, Henry Lopez? So what's really, I get that you're here to be my, consultant or a mastermind provider. But indeed, if I'm interviewing you, it's like, where are you? Who are you? What are you dealing with in your family? What are you dealing with today, in your city or in your concerns? Or, what makes your heart sing, or what do you love? And there's something about really organically grabbing on without attachment to what's going on right now and
walking with people right then, right there, so that preparation can in some ways like work against, too much preparation can work against adequately being with the person you're interviewing by thinking that you have a set of questions that you want to make sure you're going to cover.
So do you go into an episode with no preconceived idea of what the topic might end up being?
For the most part, not. I mean, there are some people like, Bob Whitaker or Mark Victor Hansen, Michael Gelb. It was hard not to have at least an idea which pathways I was going to go down. But in others, the topic's going to arise. I might start with a question, who are you? And that is one of the questions I start with when it's really truly open-ended. And then wherever they land, I take the most interesting tidbit of whatever that was in their 3 to 5 minute introduction of themselves and walk with them up that ladder. I can usually sense which of those would be, which of those are exciting for my guest, or which of those are provocative enough to share with my listeners.
Yeah, I noticed it. I don't know if you've done this on every episode so far, but I noticed you start the podcast with this kind of, you frame it in a different way than might typically be seen as a mistake, I suppose. This kind of, who are you? So the typical mistake of a beginning podcaster is like, they just say, tell us about you, and then they just like leave it open so the guest has no idea what to do,
or they just regurgitate their, their written bio or something, right?
And so, but you kind of frame it in a very, a more sort of philosophical way, which I think is kind of cool, right? It's like who are you?
Yeah, right. No, we really are at, it's not so much tell us about your most recent book. It really is like, really, who are we with? And I really invite you to consider that right now as if I'm interviewing any of you. Like, no kidding, who are you? Like that. So you see that with a little bit of press, I can get right in there with you, and you can start exploring. Well, who am I? Indeed, actually, right now, and then we can we take that and run with it.
Yeah, what I'm thinking through right here, and I'm sure Mark is as well, is how do we translate it? Our shows are about business, but at the same time, we're trying to get that connection with that list with the person I'm interviewing, right? So I'm trying to blend the two. When you talk about framework, I can see where it's about me, them understanding that I've got experience in business. I'm going to ask these questions, but I'm trying to learn from you how you ask those questions to get people to go beyond the script and open up and really share who they are.
Yeah, I could share something just and put it back to Fred. Of course, he's probably something to say, but just what I'm getting out of what he says, and we have touched upon it briefly in previous sessions of this kind of like being there, being very present with the person, and like not knowing what the answer is going to be, and all of these things. But I think also what I'm getting out of this is what questions are you asking them? What questions are you asking yourself? As you talk to them, like, I'm curious, like he said, what is their, has they got anything going on with their family right now? Not that you're going to go personal with that person, but it's an example of a question. You could think, what is there about this person that is new information to me? What guesses do I have about the way they are that I should find out that they're maybe not, or maybe that will, align with it. But I think asking oneself those questions of how can this person surprise me could be interesting. Anyways, Dr. Fred, did you have
it's exactly right. I think in some ways I end up at least nudging myself to look at the world, in the classic empathic way, to look at the world at least in the same direction that my guest is looking at, stand next to them, to recreate them, and then stand next to them or even inside of them and to attempt to see the world as they're seeing it, as they explore what it means to be a guest on my show, or as they explore whatever it means in their most recent breakthrough in business or relationship. And it doesn't have to be all good, it can be, there's like John Marshall Roberts, his conversation with me wasn't entirely pleasant. And, but it was beautiful. It was completely beautiful as we went down some rabbit holes together of the, sort of the difficulties that it is to be a human in the present day. And I feel very fearless and courageous, if you will, to take these conversations warmly down the hole with anybody, like to share with them whatever pain and struggles they're going through, and to share with them whatever ecstasies and miracles that they're experiencing as well. And that's where I think the magic is that the alignment is three ways. The alignment is with my listener, it's with my guest, and it's, like Ethan says, with myself. Like all three of us are sort of asking questions as to how to do this. What's the best thing to contribute? Where is my listening? What is it that I'm after? What's a good next question? And when do I pose it becomes another thing, because people go on and on and on, like I'm doing right now. I mean, when do you decide to cut me off and say, okay, that's great, Fred, listen, I have another question right now. And how do we segue smoothly and gracefully into the next topic? These are all just challenges that I feel like I didn't know I was getting so much practice with the 40,000 people who have called me their doctor at least one moment in their life.
Just one point. For me, it's all about authenticity. It sounds like you're
Exactly.
an authentic person on how you approach things, and you're consistent on how you do that with your guests. But equally, what I look for with my guest is really getting to understand the person, and for them to be authentic and them really tell me a story, or go into a topic which is both interesting and challenging and enlightening at the same time.
Yes. And so that's really great. And what that is, again, it's sort of the balance between how much of this show do I want to share of myself just to keep the spark lit, right? Like how much, when you say something and you resonate with me, and I want to tell you, hey, that is so much like what my experience was when I did something like that. I have to weigh the value of that, because after all, I'm really here to spotlight my guest. And so rather than make it a bully pulpit for my particular stand on any issue, there's something about my authenticity creating the space in the conversation for authenticity to be mutual. The deeper I can go to be authentic, the more likely it is that I'm delivering from at least an organic inquiry, the more likely that my guest will feel comfortable in that domain and deliver and dance in that same conversation with me. So that's what I think creating the space for that.
It's interesting. We've actually talked about, in the several times this group that, the show is kind of about us as the host more than we want to think. It's not about the guest, because they come back every week for us, right? They want our perspective, and I think what I'm gathering as you talk about that, because I reflected on it, as you said, like they want to know the guest, but they want to know how you do what you do with the guests. And what I'm getting a stronger feeling about is, who is your target audience? Authenticity. People look for authenticity in podcasts. We've talked about that before, but you in particular, it's not just the authenticity of, having my conversation about business and also being authentic at the same time. But like, can we just escape the fakeness for a little bit and be present in this moment and get Dr. Fred we're going to actually talk to this person. Like, yes. That's what Dr. Fred is bringing to us. That's kind of what I'm getting.
Well, thank you for hitting that. That's like massive pay dirt. That's massive pay dirt. If you're getting that from the conversations you're listening to about me having conversations with others, if you're actually seeing and feeling that, then I'm getting close to achieving that which I'm set out to do. Like, that's it. That's really what I'm after, is to create a conversation that has it be that, let's just start from authentic. Let's just get down to what's really so right away, and then explore from there. And really, let's get that I am just a human, or I am, and that not in a reductionistic way, but I am a human like you are, as we take steps into this magical world we call life. And what are we doing? What are we doing, and why are we doing it? And what's working and what isn't working? And how can we join hands and really, with wonder and curiosity, look out at the world around us, and then describe it and create actions to deal with it? Like, what is, the food, the bird seed comes out of these people's is it birdseed? I don't know if, it comes out of their mouth, and then it's fairly easy to see where the richness is, and then explore with my guest, whatever that is. I see it's easy anyways.
Going back to the title, the sort of removing the mask is coming from me in some way, like, or like in a like removing the mask of mental illness. And I don't know that that's your title, but it's sort of an interesting frame on that like, yeah, we're talking about mental illness, but we're talking about how it's not mental illness. And we're talking about removing people's masks. And we're all, we're kind of talking about how mental illness is its own mask that you can remove in a way. But yeah, so we're at about 8 minutes out. I want to make sure that we just sort of contextualize where we're at here. I want to check it with Mark. Mark, was there anything else? I know you added a little bit previously. Were any questions you had for Dr. Fred, or just like thoughts?
Yeah. So as a psychiatrist, how much is it different being a psychiatrist with a client and a podcast interviewer? Like, do you naturally link between the two different roles?
That is a great question, Mark. I totally appreciate that. I have worked my whole life to just meld into that there is no difference at any time with any conversation I'm having with anyone, whether I'm a psychiatrist, a father, a son, a brother, a friend, a citizen, it like just me having a conversation. And so if I don't have to remember whatever role I'm in order to create the context for the conversation I'm about to have, then I'm succeeding in that area. Now, the truth is, I've been doing telepsychiatry for about, the better part of 10 or 12 years. And so I've been online interviewing people. I've been a locum tenens and online interviewing people in all sorts of modalities, everyone from inpatient to outpatient to residential treatment centers to their own home to clinics, et cetera. And my conversations right here in this discussion aren't that different than my conversations with a podcast guest, and aren't that different if you were a bunch of patients in a hospital, or if you were rehabbing at a drug clinic or something. It would all be pretty similar. I do my very best to just listen carefully to what's being said and then respond appropriately to create moving the needle forward in a conversation with anyone.
I want to call out a few things also before we wrap up, which I'll also maybe I'll forward you some of these resources as we talked about various things. Jay Klaus is someone that we had on the show who also had a podcasting, like a network that he joined, right? So it's something interesting to look at for those patterns of, are you going to join a larger group? Cortland Allen, also, he's owned by Stripe. My podcast works with him and the Indie Hackers Network. So that's an interesting relationship to look at, like being the podcast representative of a larger brand in some way. He's got a great deal with them. And I'm sure you're familiar with the Esther Perel podcast. Are you familiar with Esther Perel?
I've not listened. I've heard of it again, and I'm not.
I feel like
not
that
listened.
might be a good resource to check out. The other thing, just about this sort of idea of mental illness, is these whole idea. I'm thinking about disabilities and how people talk about differently abled, and I'm like curious if there's sort of a label that comes to apply to what you're talking about there. Right? Like not disabled, differently abled, but applying that kind of concept to the mental health space. So those are just some things I want to squeeze in there.
Well, we had talked a little bit about like mental health for the mental health or mental wealth for the mentally healthy. There's something like, you are not broken. That's that too. There's something very timely about take off your mask, or even double masking for that process anyways. Like, those are things that we have to consider. When we look at the word mask is a little bit loaded these days in our culture. But you could also make a case that so much of the pandemic is mentally ill, is mental illness run rampant as either a secondary function, or some people would even guess that it's a primary function of the entire pandemic. And then we start, scratching up against the surface of controversy there, and you have to be cautious, of course.
Just one last thing. I know we're running out of time. So, what's your view on people that that say that my mental health is actually a superpower? I've gone through depression. I'm now empathetic with other people, or I have ADHD and or autism, and that's actually a superpower. What's your view, and what do your guests sort of explore with that?
Well, it isn't, first of all, congratulations for getting it as a superpower. Anything that's empowering to your life is fabulous. If what you got is that, because you just realized this about yourself, you became someone who can empathize with others who are struggling with the same issue, that's a really terrific finding. I think that the question becomes is, if you say I have depression and now I can relate to people who are depressed, you're adding validity to the notion that depression is a defect. Still, you're walking through. I have this condition, and
but people might say I've had depression. I'm empathetic with everyone, not just with people with depression.
That's right. And I would say that that's actually what my situation is that having vicariously experienced so much of what mental illness is, from deep into the hospitals, into state hospitals, all the way to the prisons, all the way to the, to the Beverly Hills area, like the whole gamut of what it means to be mentally healthy or mentally ill. There is an opportunity to see each and every human as being extraordinary, even if they have self-labeled, or the people who love them has labeled them as being mentally ill, like really looking in the eyes of another person without really caring at all about whatever condition someone has bestowed upon them. Like really getting what I'm here with is another human just like me laterally. And there is remarkable magic that comes from just standing still and looking at another human square in the eye, not as more than or not as less than.
There is nothing wrong with you. Is that something that's been used before? Or is that?
1 second. 1 second.
For sure. Oh, did he lose his audio or something? Are you having an issue with your audio?
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. Could you hear?
Okay, so sorry. Yeah, my phone went over the top of it and canceled all my noise. So I'm so sorry.
No problem.
Okay, say that again.
I have sort of one more thing to say, and of course, anybody that needs to sign off, it's fine. We're about at time, so we'll wrap up in a minute. But
if you have to leave, thanks for being. By the way,
there is nothing wrong with you. Like that sort of phrase again. I'm sort of keep thinking of what like good titles and good themes, and that also seems like another interesting one too. I don't know. Maybe it's taken someplace else, but it seems quite appropriate.
Yeah, there is nothing wrong with you. It's true. It's actually true. It's not even a good way to think about things, or really just there's nothing wrong with you.
Right. But a large percentage of people do think that.
My parting thought, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, Henry, please.
Yeah, my parting thought, Dr. Fred, is listen, in my experience, it seems to me like when you're doing the podcast, you're in one of your zones of genius, you're enjoying it. I think that's the key to it. If you're enjoying these conversations, and like you said, even if you just impact one person, then you're doing it. My experience, it's a long game. Hopefully some of these ideas that you're talking about do come to fruition, but I would say stick to it. It's a long game in my experience to gain that audience. But that's why for me, as I've talked about often on this show, one of the top ways I decide to have a guest on or not is, do I want to have a conversation with that person? And I encourage you to continue taking the approach you have been, where it seems like, because you mentioned you could do it all day, that when you're done with an episode, you're energized. And listen, if nothing else, then that's what you're getting out of it. I think it's fantastic. And keep in mind what we've been sharing with you with that shit, which I think you get. People are going to tune in repeatedly, and you build an audience because of you. They might tune in for a special guest, but it's you that they're developing the relationship with.
Right. Thank you. I got that. Yeah.
So, anybody else have any parting words? Okay, cool. If Rob, Henry, or Vinay can stay on for a minute, we will. I'll sign us off, and we'll say goodbye officially. But yeah, I think that sounds good. Dr. Fred, I really appreciate you jumping on here and being so open and sharing everything about what you're doing and having a good conversation with us. So thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. It was really just an honor to meet all of you. Thank you for digging in with me. And I look forward to catching you on the flip side, wherever that is.
Do you want to share how people can find things about you? It's your website,
Sure.
I suppose. Or...
Sure. Welcome to humanity.net is the main website. It's going through a transformation indeed. So the lead magnets and the funnels that are being created are being revised to... 3 years ago, I didn't have it that I would be anywhere near where I am right now. So it's like, wow, look what we're dealing with now. And so now I am who I am, and I get to do this. And Dr. Fred at welcometohumanity.net is my email. Cool. And I can be reached by telephone, and I can be reached by email, and I can be reached on any of the standard social medias. Facebook and LinkedIn appear somehow to be the ones that I am these days circulating around, and but I also play a little bit in the others.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Fred. I'll definitely be seeing you in the coming days, and
okay.
We'll catch you later.
Have all right. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Good night.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Great meeting you. Yeah.
All right. Let me sign us offline here.